So if you're a projector, one of the things that's really essential to keep in mind is that families are very, very distorting. Yeah, I know, but I mean, there are people that are really designed for that. First of all, if you're a generator, you're designed to envelop. So you're designed to take in those auras of others. So you go to Thanksgiving dinner, and despite the fact that there are this and that's about it, your enveloping aura puts you there, and it keeps you there, and it holds you there, and it's all okay. But if you're a projector, projectors are supposed to be on the outside of the group, directing inward, rather than being on the inside of the group and losing all their power. And the moment that a projector gets into the group is the moment that they lose their capacity to guide and become conditioned to being a slave. So, most projectors in families are the family super slave. This is where the family puts all the pressure. This is where the family puts all the guilt. This is where the family puts the trip. This is where you're never good enough because you were never a manifester. That you can never really get things done, and there's all this pressure. So you've got all these projectors, particularly when they go home for a family visit, they really go nuts. It's very depressing. They lose their identity in that. They lose their power in that. Now, I always have to be careful. I'm a manifester, and what I say has impact. So you also have to see the other side of that. I'm not suggesting for a moment that all you projectors be celibate, never have families, all that kind of stuff. It really isn't about that, but it really is about understanding your nature. You're at your best one-on-one. So if you're going to go to a family gathering, put yourself in the kind of situation where you don't have to sit in the middle of the puddle, and get yourself dragged into a level that's not there. Make your one-on-one contacts. Deal with one person at a time. Try not to get caught in, and particularly don't get in one of those situations where everybody sits around the table and says, George or Joni has a problem, what should we do? The kind of thing where you get dragged into the inside of that and your guidance is never going to be accepted. I mean, it's the first thing to realize about being a projector and looking at your families is that your families don't recognize your wisdom, don't recognize that you can be a guide. Projector children normally look at their parents and go, oh, Jesus. I mean, this is the projector thing. You look at your parents and you go, oh, no. And you can't tell them. You're 5 years old. You can't tell your mother what to do. You can't tell her to straighten up her life. You can try. It isn't necessarily going to be effective, but nonetheless, you can try, you can do that thing. But it's something to understand, again, about what it is to be a projector. I mean, I know this is a manifester. I have a closed and repelling aura. I'm great in family situations. I don't even want anybody to come near me, let alone that, I'm welcomed in that kind of environment. And of course, they all want to, do that kind of thing. And there's this incredible disinterest that arises out of the aura. We all have to accept our nature and compensate for it intelligently. I mean, the moment that you understand any kind of mechanic, basically what you're being given is you're being given a tool. You're being given a way of seeing, all right, this is the way it works, so how do I take advantage of this? So part of what I want to give you today is an indication of those of you that are real suckers for the group, okay, and those of you that aren't, which means you should really be aware because you often think you should be. Look, if I have a projector who's not designed, by design, to get seduced into the group, that's what you want. The not-self projector, oh, why did they leave me out? Why can't I be in that? I need, all of this kind of, poor me. And of course, if you're really designed to be lost in the group, you get lost in the group. You give up everything. You end up being the ultimate service, no matter what it is. You got a senile parent, all of a sudden there's the burden. You get dumped with all these kinds of things because it's always projectors that hold the bag. Yeah? So you might as well see it, and not get stuck with it, because otherwise that's what happens to you. Okay, I'm going to take you through one at a time, and I'm going to start with Christy. Split definition. The moment that you're a split definition projector, should I say something nasty? Nah. The moment that you're a split definition projector, it means that there is nothing more important to you than being able to discern who's the right relationship. If you're a split definition projector, it's always that way. And in your case, Christy, you're a broad split, which means it's difficult for you because everybody you look at has a problem. Everybody you look at has a problem. Everybody. It's always the other. They all have a problem. They're all fucked up. The whole world's crazy. They're nuts. And of course it creates dilemmas because you're never seeing that, God forbid that you should be part of the problem. It's always everybody else that's the problem. You're here to be recognized for your mind. I mean, this is a 63-4 definition, mental definition, logical definition, somebody that's here to be recognized for their answers and recognized for the ability that not only do you have answers, but you can sell them. It's always good to be a transmitter. Transmitters 4426, that channel, has this nice name, Surrender. This is called salesmanship. The transmitter. The transmitter always has access to the tribe, always has access to those people that are around you. They're the ones that are here to know that you're the one. So if they got a problem, if they want somebody else to hear about that problem, they are naturally recognize that you're the person to transmit it. I mean, transmitters are great gossips, eh? And gossip is a wonderful thing because without gossip, we don't know what the hell's going on, eh? I mean, you don't. As a matter of fact, gossip is the only thing that holds tribes together. The only thing that holds tribes together. Did you hear about, Nelson? So you're here to be recognized for your ability to get information out. You're here to be recognized for your answers. If you're not recognized for your answers, if you're not recognized for your ability to get things out, you're not being recognized. I mean, it's simple. This is what it is. Now, as a projector, you have no direct connection to being involved in groups at all. Okay? So the moment that you want to be on the inside, the moment you want to belong is the moment you're really in trouble, okay? Because that is not the way it works. It's okay for you to be on the outside looking in. It's okay for you to be on the outside directing in that sense. But the moment you get on the inside, and the moment that you're on the inside, you're going to be managed by other people, and it's going to really annoy you. Because they're always going to be telling you what to do. And this is not what projectors are about. You're here to tell other people when they ask what to do. If they don't ask, don't tell. Sounds like a gay commercial. Don't ask, don't tell. Eden. Now here's an interesting example. Here's a projector, single definition, only definition. The only definition is the throat to the identity. Nothing else, through the channel of leadership. So it's a no-brainer, right? You're here to be recognized as a leader. If nobody's saying to you, will you be my leader, you've got nothing to do. Because you can't just stand up there and say, hey, I'm a leader, follow me. Because nobody's going to follow you. The only beings that are going to follow you are the ones that recognize that you're a leader. Allow people to recognize that you're a leader. Now, the thing to be clear about when you're a single definition projector is that all those open centers are really powerful, powerful influences, conditioning influences, deep conditioning influences. So, it is something really to grasp about this kind of definition. This is a self-projected authority. In other words, what that means is what you say in the now is the only thing you can ever trust. Think about that, these people. The only thing you can ever trust is what you say in the now and what you say spontaneously after invitation. The other thing is, you're a leader who expresses themselves through words. So people who are going to ask for your verbal guidance, who are going to invite you to give them their verbal guidance, these are the beings that really are on your fractal. These are the ones that will allow you to be recognized as a leader. And being recognized by a leader, again, will bring its rewards. Now, in your case, you're somebody that has very strong penta definition. The 31-7 is part of the penta configuration. And basically what that means is that the moment that you get into a group, you're immediately given responsibilities for administration. Now, that isn't necessarily where you belong, because then you can't guide in any of the other areas that are possible. Because what happens to projectors when you get pulled into groups? You get pigeonholed into certain activities, and you can't get out of them at all. So somebody has the 31-7, when they're in a group, everybody just wants you to plan. You make the plans. That's all. They don't want you to realize them. They don't want you, they don't want you to do any of the other things but, those administrative things. Same thing in the family. In a family situation, if you have the 31-7, the family always expects you to be the heavy one. You're the one that has to decide who gets punished. You're the one who has to decide who's been good and who's been bad. This is one of those things where you get trapped in things that are not correct for you. Remember, you're really here not to be seduced into those group functions in which you lose your one-on-one potential to be able to be effective as a projector. All right, Eric. Now, you're a triple split projector. Right? I mean, it's the fascinating thing about projectors, because projectors have all of these possibilities. Right? So you're a triple split projector. So the first thing about being a triple split projector is recognizing that the only way that you can make a decision is after you've been through auric contact. Look, anybody that's got a split, you're always trying to hook up the parts. So you got 3 parts, and there's no set way to hook them all up. There isn't. It's not like being a split, and if you get a gate or a channel, you can bring the 2 parts together. Triple split, there's all kinds of variations. So in order for you to make a decision that's correct for you, you need to bring those 3 parts of you together. And the only way that you can really do that is by taking advantage of the public aura. So you're here to take advantage of the public aura. It's like being in a room like this. Or being in a cafe or a theater or a bus or whatever the case may be. In those environments, those 3 parts of you are being brought together without prejudice. If you have one person pulling all those parts together, eventually you're not going to be happy with that. Triple splits have difficulties maintaining relationships with people over long periods of time because they tend to be influenced in a very, very powerful way because they're always being aligned in a certain way. So that's a key for you. The other thing is that your recognition operates in different levels. You're a thinker. This is your head center to the ajna through the 6124. So you're a thinker. So you're here to be recognized for your individual, your unique way of thinking. You're here to be recognized as a leader. You have the channel 31-7. And you're here to be recognized as a transmitter. Now, there's a lot of transmitters in the room. Transmitters are very, very powerful beings because they're the ones that get the word out, whatever the word happens to be. But this is what they're there for. They're there to transmit the news. They're there to transmit information. So you're here to be recognized as somebody that can get the information out. You're here to be recognized as a thinker. You're here to be recognized as a leader. If you don't get that recognition, those beings are not for you. You're here to be invited to transmit, invited to lead, invited to think, literally, to be able to express those things for the benefit of others. So again, when you're looking at your design, very, very important to see that your design is pointing to precisely what other people are here to recognize in you. And what happens to us is that because we live out our lives in all that openness, we get stuck in this open center or that open center and we're conditioned, then what we're putting out in our aura confuses what other people see. So they tend to imagine what they see. They tend to see your conditioning. So you're unemotional and you're always in an emotional snit, and they're going to recognize you as an emotional being, but you're not. So the more correct you are in the way in which you live out your process, the more you're going to get specific recognition. Now, anybody that carries leadership, the 31-7, the channel of the alpha, leadership for good or bad, blah, 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 all that stuff, you have to see that this is one of those very, very powerful activations for a projector because it's pointing specifically to the fact that this is what you're about. In other words, this is the way you're going to live out your role in this life. You need to live out your role as a leader, as a thinking leader, as a leader that transmits, and again, you have to be invited to that. No invitation doesn't work. It's like a democratic election. You can't claim the victory. You have to be elected to it, selected for it, whatever the case may be. So everything about being a projector is understanding that the more pure you are in the way in which you live your process, the more your definition gets recognized by the other. Now understand something. I reference this as a generic channel of leadership. Your leadership is dependent on what turned out to be your focus. In other words, that thing that you've studied, that thing that you've mastered, that thing that you've built up all your detailed resources, that's the thing that becomes the key in the leadership. So, for example, let's say that you studied engineering. Right? If somebody is going to recognize you as a leader, they're going to recognize you as a leader in that area. In other words, whatever your background is, whatever your key is in terms of what you've mastered as a projector, this is what's going to be reflected in those invitations. This is what they're recognizing. All right, Felicity. 1156, unconscious. You're not somebody that has a natural connection to groups at all, and you can end up being very, very heavily micromanaged. This is one of the most difficult things for projectors, is that the moment that they end up in groups, everybody else tries to guide them. I mean, get the joke. Right? You end up in a group and there's some generator telling you what you should be doing. And they do. They will tell you precisely what you should do and tell you that you're useless at it as well. You're not a really good worker. No, I didn't come here to work. Well, work here, you get paid. And the moment you're in the group, you're really in trouble, because that's the moment that you lose your power, you lose your guidance, you lose all of those things, and you don't get the recognition. The moment they drag you into the group, the only thing that gets recognized is the little activations that you have in the group aura. Which means that, the main themes of who you are can be totally lost. Nobody's interested. So inside that group, you're not going to get the recognition. Projectors get recognition from one person at a time. I mean, it's the way that it works. If you go into a group, you're not going to be recognized. You're not. This is one of the things to see. And if you do get attention, which is a different thing, you're going to get attention for all the negatives that are there in your process. All of that conditioning that you're carrying, all of that stuff. They're going to say to you, wow, you'd be great at that. And, if you look at your design, you see, but that's not me. What do you mean I'm going to be great at that? Oh, you're going to be a great organizer. No, you're talking about my wife. She's the 1762, not me. You end up being, recognized for, those aspects of conditioning that you've taken in that you think is you because they're not there, so you want them. I got to have them. It's amazing how many people desire being distorted. Pure desire. Let me be what I'm not. Let me be recognized for what I'm not, and let me suffer afterwards. And complain that nobody sees me. That nobody knows who I am, and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. All right. Gisela. Channel 1858, channel of judgment. And channel 4130, the channel of recognition. So recognition and judgment. Recognition of feelings, recognition through feelings, splenic judgment, deep judgmental capacity. Here's somebody that's here to be recognized, to see what's wrong. Oh, are they good? I mean, 1858s, you take them into your house. You've just had 19 cleaning ladies do your house. You bring the 1858 into your house. They're there for 30 seconds, and they say, do you see all that dirt over there? I mean, an 1858 can spot something that's not correct so quickly. This is the fastest judgmental system in the world. Now, of course, the dilemma with being an 1858 is that if you don't play the projector game, you're going to be hated for it. Loathed for it. Nothing like an 1858 projector that volunteers a criticism. Wow. All hell breaks loose. Absolutely. The punishment that they get in return is horrendous. And the tragedy of all that is, and I like black humor, there you've got some idiot standing there. You're in 1858. You see that they're standing on a pothole and they're about to disappear. And you say to them, excuse me, you're standing in a very dangerous place. And the other person looks at them and, who the hell are you talking about? Leave me alone. You can tell them the most incredible thing. You can have the most transforming knowledge for them in that moment. And all you're going to meet is resistance. You bitch, shut up. What, I don't need this. Keep it to yourself. So if you're in 1858, and here's an 1858, and a 4130, the 4130 recognizes when people are on totally the wrong track. This is the beginnings of the human experiential way. You're a 4130. Some idiot is standing in front of you and you're saying, you're going in the wrong direction. And they tell you to mind your own business. Even though the next second they're going to step into the street and get hit by a bus. And it doesn't matter how good your advice is, they're not interested. See, if they ask you, you become a saint. How nice, Oh, she saved my life. She told me just what I needed to know, But if you're not asked, so you're here to be recognized for that potential, which means that you're here to wait, literally. Here to wait for somebody to ask you for correction, ask you for guidance. The other thing is in your design, you're very, very open through the center of your design. And fundamentally what that means is that groups are a terrible seduction for you and the worst possible place to be. If you only have minor activations, no definitions between the throat and the sacral, being in a group, being in a family, being in any kind of configuration, 3 to 5 people, that's not your place. I have very, very weak penta-activations. Right? Okay, and I have a family, right? I do the very best I can to be outside any group activity. I deal with my family one-on-one. The moment that we're in a group, I'm the local idiot. No joke. The moment I have no power, I have nothing. I'm not even a manifester anymore. I'm an inert wallet. Other than that, I'm nothing else. It's just the way that it is. And if I say, let's do this, everybody looks at me and he speaks. It's not like, oh, yeah, we're all going to do that. Great leadership. No. I spend most of my time in a room by myself. I'm a manifester. I don't want that. The moment it's the way I run my business. I never have that. I deal with people either virtually or one at a time. Because the moment you put me into a group, I'm no longer in charge of anything. No matter what it appears to be as a figurehead, I'm not in charge of anything. You step into a group environment, you stop having the power to be a projector. You lose it. You end up being hauled into those mechanics in which you're being pigeonholed into something and you're not being recognized anymore. You have to know how to put your hand up in the air and say, no, excuse me, no, I don't want this. And again, taking advantage of mechanics, I don't have a bad relationship with my family. We have a warm, loving relationship. All of that's fine. Because it's about being honest. It's about being correct. You cannot be what you cannot be. As a manifester with a closed aura, I cannot be some soft, fuzzy, warm creature. It's not possible. If I pretended that, it would be a terrible performance, because it's not what I am. There's just this closed aura. What the hell am I going to do? But if you explain that to your children, they get it. The moment, the best look on any teenager's face is when they see their parents' design. Children who know design. Oh, what a trip that is. I remember the look on my son's face when he looked at his mother and I. And he looked back and forth. And he looked at me and he looked back and forth. It was like, oh, now I get it. Because you do. You get it. And when you get it, it's great because you can just let go of all the crap. The whole thing that comes with not understanding is projection. You build up all these stories about what you think. And all that does is lead you to do things that you shouldn't be doing in the first place. It does. It leads to all kinds of problems. Instead of just accepting what you are and living it. We are always seduced by what we're not. Projectors are seduced by manifestation and generating. Projectors who are supposed to be outside the group are seduced by being inside the group. Oh, let me be one of all, all the others. And quick way to get lost. Janice, split definition. Unconscious 2551. Unconscious 2551 is an interesting thing because you've got ego projected authority. And everything about being an unconscious initiator is how aware you have to be of what you're doing in your life. Let me give you an example. You're an unconscious initiator and you're sitting with a bunch of friends. And you're just having a conversation. And you just got yourself a new yoga teacher. That kind of thing. Eh? And you mention it. You don't go into any great detail. You don't do any sales pitch. You don't do anything. All you do is mention it. Oh, I found this really interesting teacher. Blah, blah, blah. That day, those other people, they're going to be so incredibly interested in that. They just are. Because they have been initiated in that. And they go looking for that. Oh, I want that too. Oh, that must be good. Oh, that's going to be terrific. So unconscious initiators have a lot of influence on people. And if they don't understand that, that can really blow up on you. Because they leave their yoga teacher and go to the one you talked about. And they don't like the person. And then they blame you. And they will blame you. They will say, that's all your fault. You said that this, and you go back in your head and you think, but I didn't try to convince them of that. I didn't try to get them to do this. I was just conversation. I was just mentioning that. That's what it is to be an unconscious initiator. You put things deeply inside of beings. Okay. But what you're really here to be recognized for, because it's the part of you that you're being recognized because it's conscious, is your mind. And again, anyone who's a 63-4, what the other is expecting is an answer from you. This is the expectation. The 4 is the gate of answers, formulas. So if somebody's really recognizing you, what they're recognizing in you is that you can provide them with an answer. So if they ask you a question and you don't give them an answer, does your reputation suffer? Because they're expecting that you have an answer. Now, the danger is making up answers. Because making up answers is really easy, particularly if you're logical. Logical people are the people that lie the best. Because, like statistics, you can twist these things to give you whatever you like, okay? So you end up being a person under enormous pressure to deliver an answer, so you end up grabbing for straws, and sort of trying to put an answer together. Invitation heals all that. It's the magic of being a projector. You wait for the invitation. The recognition is going to be there. Yes, they're going to recognize the potential for answers. Not only that, a part of them is going to recognize that your answer may initiate them. Because that's the real potential, eh? The initiation that can come out of that answer. And it all begins with the same thing. It all begins with that invitation. You have the same thing in relationship to groups. That is, you've got a very weak penta. And you can see that this is basically the way it should run in the continuity. In the sense that, projectors are not really designed to be on that inside. So most projectors in their genetic continuity are going to have openness in that grouping area so that it's not what their nature is, but it is a deep conditioning attraction. Most projectors, because they feel deeply alienated in life, they do. They never really feel like they're like everybody else, which means like generators, basically. They never have that sense that they are being seen, that they are being recognized, and there's an assumption that the way to do that is to be embedded in some kind of group. If I join the club, everybody's going to, see me, connect with me, make me feel good, blah, blah, blah. You can run the club. It's the old Groucho Marx line. I would never belong to an organization that would have me as a member. Don't belong to any organizations that would have you as a member. Be the organization that brings in others. But be very careful about getting trapped in those things, because the moment you're trapped in a penta, the moment you're trapped in the small group, is the moment that you lose what is recognizable in you. In this case, with Janice's chart, because it's a weak penta, the moment that you're in the penta, nobody recognizes that you're an initiator, and nobody recognizes that you have the answers, and nobody gives a shit. So it doesn't matter whether you feel like, you can't get your thing. They don't see it. It's not their fault. You get into this very confined structure, and those aspects that you're here to be recognized for don't fit in anymore. So they don't see you. And then you've got these little bits and pieces that are in there, so all they want to do is get you to work on one of those bits and pieces. Manage you, put you in your place, make sure that you do your thing, and stay out of the way. And they don't see the rest. And of course, the family upbringing for a projector without awareness, this is what it leads to. It leads to those aspects in you that are there to be recognized. When you're in the family, they're just not recognized. My family has no idea what I do. I mean, my siblings and, this kind of thing. Because the moment that I'm in there, I'm exactly what I was when I was 8 years old. In the family construct, only being seen in those little bits and pieces and being orchestrated and conditioned to just stay in one of those places and shut up. The rest of it, we don't need that. We don't need your initiation, and we don't need your perfected form, and we don't need awakening. We don't need any of that shit. Shut up. Just stay in your little hole over here and be there. And it's what happens in families. Because as long as you don't have any penta strength, you don't have a leg to stand on in the family environment. You just don't. I have a family that's filled with penta people. They're penta forces. They rule the family. They just do. Because they belong in that construct and they fit in it. Nice for them. Not for me. Not for you. John, you're here to be an organizing thinker. That's what you're here to be recognized for. You're here to be recognized for your ability to organize the Maya, organize information, and that organizing information leads to the strength of your throat system, because fundamentally you're here to be an articulating being. I mean, most of the projectors you see that have defined throats, it's pointing right away to their capacity. That is, these are the ones that are here to provide instruction. They're the ones that are here to tell you things that they can't do. If you look at somebody's design and you see they have a defined throat, what you get to see is that they can tell you stuff, but they're not designed to do it. And that's not hypocrisy, which it often appears to be, particularly those who don't get what's going on. This is the projector gift, so it's your gift. That is, you're here to articulate organization. The 1762 is a judgmental channel. It's opinions backed up by facts. So you're here to express your opinions and your facts, and you're here to be recognized for that. So if someone isn't interested in your mind, if somebody says to you that they love your body, kill them. Okay? Because these are the wrong people for you, right? The only way you're going to be recognized is when people recognize you intellectually. There's no other way. And what they're really recognizing is your logic. This is what they're looking for. They're looking for a logic, that they can trust, that can help them to organize. So, for example, as a projector, you're here to guide people in the best way to be organized and to provide them with that kind of managerial advice. You're very open in terms of the penta. And I mean, when you think about what happens to a projector when they go into this, group phenomena. By the way, all of you in this puddle in here, I mean, all of these projector auras all together, none of you are being recognized. Other than the fact that technically I can look at your charts and see it. It's not like that's what's shining out in the aura. You're all stuck in these penta configurations. You're all stuck in these homogenizing greater auras. And whenever you're in that, you're just another lump of meat behind a desk. You're not that something different. You're not that recognizably different. But the moment that you're alone with somebody in the elevator, totally different movie. Because then you're out of the penta, and the moment you're out of the penta, your natural recognition material becomes obvious. In any kind of group aura, it's not. It's not. It's why whenever you see projectors at any kind of human design event, they're the ones that are checking everybody's design. They're the ones that are looking for what's there because they can't see it in the aura itself, because you can't just recognize it. Because the moment you try to recognize a certain aspect in any projector in this room, you got all the conditioning, all the other elements, you got all of the form principle organizing at work, and you all lose that potential. So you really have to be aware of your relationship to any kind of group environment. Okay, Jean-Pierre. Now here's a split. And again, remember, whenever you're looking at a split, you're always looking at particularly a basic split where one gate will make the difference. In this design, this is somebody with a 1762, and they also have the channel of the transmitter, so the 44 and the 26, the channel of struggle, and the channel of emoting. Okay? So this is somebody that's is an individual transmitter. And they're here to be recognized for their individual transmission. In other words, they're here to be recognized for a creative process, because that's what individual transmission is really all about. And if they're not recognized for that individual transmission, they don't get the potential that's there for them in this life. Now, when you look at a split and you look at the gates that can connect them, these become the most powerful conditioning forces. In this case, it's the 21st gate. So here's somebody that can be deeply seduced by trying to find a way to control everything. Control the universe, control all those silly people out there that don't recognize them, take control of everything, and of course they can't. The moment they try to is the moment that they lose all of that. Again, here is somebody, classic example. If you look at this throat to the G center, not a single activation. Nothing in that pentaconstruct. Absolutely nothing. Totally open space. Nothing there. And you put this person inside of a group, and the moment you put this person inside of a group, they don't get recognized. They don't. Interesting thing to really think about. What happens to us? They don't. They end up being submerged in whatever the process happens to be. And again, like all projectors, they get taken advantage of, for whatever their skill set happens to be. But in terms of actual recognition, the only way they get recognition is if they're invited. Now, I want you to see it from the other end. Let's say that you're a projector. You know that groups are a dilemma for you. You know you lose your recognition, but somebody comes up to you and invites you into a group, and your authority says yes. Then it's perfect. No matter what I tell you, you have to see something. According to your strategy and authority, anything is possible. It's simply about whether it's correct for you. It's whether entering into it is correct for you. That person, like this person, who would accept an invitation and enter into a group, they're not going to feel unrecognized, because that's where the invitation was. What they have to accept is that's what got them in. What keeps them there is something else. In other words, their relationship to whatever the task, the skill, or whatever the thing happens to be. But without the invitation, it doesn't work. So you can be very open. For example, family. That situation where you decide that you're going to go visit your family. Put a gun to your head now. Okay? Don't decide that you're going to go visit your family. Wait for the invitation. Wait for the invitation. And if they don't invite you, the hell with them. But if they invite you, then you can go into those environments. You're being recognized. You can go in if you're going in according to your strategy and authority. You don't want to stay there forever. But you can go in and it's not unhealthy for you. But the moment that you barge into any group, the moment you put yourself in that kind of situation, you lose all recognition. Most projectors are dying for recognition. So they hope that they can create it, by manifesting, by putting themselves in certain situations to try to get that recognition, and it simply doesn't work. Okay, Kevin. Channel 1858, channel of judgment, and then going through the tribal circuitry. The 19 to the 49 channel of synthesis, and the 4037 the channel of community. So you're one of these beings that's here to be recognized for the way in which your judgment can be applied to the community. But obviously, the way your judgment can be applied to the community can operate in many different ways depending on what the entry point is. I mean, you're always somebody here that is here to assess the value of the bargain. Always. You're always here to bring judgment to that. You're always here to challenge bargains that are not correct. In other words, you're looking at the basic bonds that are there in the community and bringing judgmental potential to that. Now, you're incredibly weak in the penta. I mean, incredibly weak. So the moment that you enter into a group situation, those aspects that are so powerful in your design are ignored. And it's not like it's anybody's fault. It just